The Pittsburgh Steelers have just won the 2024 NFL Draft by a landslide. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they went into this offseason with many needs and many holes to fill on their roster, and they filled each and every one of them, but also getting great high-value picks at each draft selection. So, the Steelers, they went into the offseason, they needed an offensive tackle. Whether that's left tackle or right tackle, we'll have to wait and see. They needed a center. They needed to fill the cornerback position in terms of depth, the defensive lineman position in terms of depth, and just fill out the roster in terms of depth elsewhere. And that's exactly what they did. Heading into the first night of the draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers, on the clock, they had every option available. Do they want to go and select the top cornerback available? Do they want to go select the top center that's still on the board? Or do they want to select a different position? Well, they decided to go offensive tackle. They felt as though Troy Fautanu was the best pick, and that's what they got. They selected him, and they filled a need at the offensive tackle position. Whether that be left tackle, in which he played most of his games in college, or are they going to put him at right tackle? We'll have to wait and see what position Broderick Jones and him play at, but they filled a starting need at the offensive tackle position, and that's a high-value pick because many people had him going earlier. Many people didn't have him sliding down to the Steelers, but because other positions and more quarterbacks were taken off the board early, everyone fell down a spot, leading the Pittsburgh Steelers to grab a guy they really liked throughout the draft process. So they got the guy they wanted, and they got their franchise tackle. And then you look at their second round pick. Like I said, all offense was going early on in the draft. No defensive players went until pick number 15. So everyone slid down a spot in terms of defensive players, offense players. Everyone who you thought would have went earlier fell down a spot, leading the center position available for the Steelers. Many people didn't have Zach Frazier falling down to the draft in the second round. Many people had him going high second or maybe even late first. But even Jackson Powers Johnson, he fell down in this draft as well. He only went, 7 spots before the Steelers selection. And the only person who really went in the first round who wasn't a pure center was Graham Barton. So the Pittsburgh Steelers got the purest center. And what do I mean by that in this year's draft? I mean the person who played the most at the center spots. Him and Jackson Powers, it was really between them for the true center of this draft class. Graham Barton could play any position on the offensive line in terms of guard or center. So the Pittsburgh Steelers got the best center available, and that's who they wanted too. You look at the draft process, apparently Zach Frazier told the media that when Mike Tomlin spoke to him at the pro day, at the meeting's pre-draft visit, he told them basically, don't answer your phone unless you see the Pittsburgh Steelers area code, meaning that the Pittsburgh Steelers wanted him, and they knew if he was there, that he would be the selection. And guess what? He fell to the Steelers. So that was not only a position of need, they needed to fill the starting center role because Mason Cole got cut this offseason to save some cap space because he wasn't doing great. He was inconsistent, snapping the ball at the quarterback's feet, being off balance. They needed to fill that center spot. And years ago, they passed on Creed Humphrey for Pat Frymouth, but they weren't going to do that the same thing this year. They did not pass on Zach Frazier for a different position. They grabbed him. He fell, highest pick value, and that's what they got. Not only was he the best player available, but he was also the position of need. So that's what makes that pick so great. And the first 2 picks, the Steelers filled the biggest holes on their team and grabbed the best player available. Now, looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers' next selection, what position did they need? Well, they needed a wide receiver. And that's a position that they picked. They picked Wilson with that selection in the 3rd round. So they filled a need at offense tackle, filled a need at center, and then filled their need at wide receiver. All 3 needs, they filled it right away. So they get Wilson, and Mike Tomlin really liked that pick. He said that Wilson is basically a guy with top-end speed, and someone, if he reaches that top-end speed, could be a difference maker for the team. And also, just looking at his film, he's really good at route running, and that's something the Pittsburgh Steelers need as well. They traded away Deontay Johnson to Carolina, and that left a hole in the roster, especially with creating separation on the routes. So now they get Wilson to fill that hole. And not only was he just a need for the team, he was also one of the best players available at that selection as well. So the Pittsburgh Steelers fill another hole in their roster at that selection, and someone who could be a difference maker for the team starting from day one. You see all the people the Pittsburgh Steelers selected so far, they're guys that could be starting from day one. Since when do players really start from day one? But Steelers are getting the players that they want and players that could do that as well, day one starters. And then just looking at their next selection, this might even be the best value pick in the whole draft, and especially for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the spot that he was taken. Their next selection in the 3rd round, the Steelers selected inside linebacker. And who did they pick? Well, they picked Peyton Wilson. Once again, another Wilson that they drafted. But they get Peyton Wilson, and he's a guy that fell in the draft because of injury concerns. But he's been healthy the last 2 years. The last time he really suffered injury was 3 years ago. And the reason why he was still there is because apparently he has no ACL. I'll get into that more in a different video. But he is the best inside linebacker in this draft. Many people labeled him as the best inside linebacker. You look at the draft experts, draft rankings, everything like that, he was labeled the best. So if the Pittsburgh Steelers in round 3, the late round 3, basically early round 4, are getting the best inside linebacker in the entire class, and they have kind of a need there because of injury concerns with Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts late towards the end of the last season. You don't know how Cole Holcomb's injury kind of reevaluation's doing. So if they kind of have a need there and they get the best inside linebacker in the class, that's literally the best case scenario. The Steelers could have went somewhere else, maybe picked up another wide receiver, could have picked up cornerback depth, defense line depth, or a different area. But no, they got the best inside linebacker available. Someone who could both play with speed in zone coverage, man coverage, going tight ends, running backs, but someone who's also good at tackles, one of the leading tacklers. And like Mike Tomlin said, he was award-winning inside linebacker. And to get a guy like that with experience, that's huge. And Mike Tomlin really liked that pick, as he said in his press conference. So once again, the Steelers' first 4 selections now, they're hitting everything that they want. The first 3 were their top needs, and their next pick was best player. That was still there, and a need as well in terms of depth and kind of just a security blanket just in case of injuries happen again. But moving over to the Steelers' next selection, this led them because they filled all their draft needs. They didn't have any more left. They could do whatever they wanted. They could go whatever position they wanted in that 4th round. And who did they end up taking? Well, they end up taking a guard. And that guard was Mason McCormick. And the reason why you may be wondering, why would the Steelers select a guard? They already have 2 guards on the roster. Well, they're setting themselves up. You look at the Steelers that are going to be up and coming next season, James Daniels will be a free agent. He's going to need a huge contract. The year after that, Isaac Seumalo, he's going to be up for a contract. So the Steelers are setting themselves up for picking players not only for this season, but people who they believe could be huge contributors down the road, especially when those contracts up. Maybe they don't want to pay both their guards in the coming years. So if they set it up to where this guard rookie in 2 years, in 1 year, could take over and be a huge starter for the Steelers at this guard or whatever position he plays, that could be huge for them moving forward. So they're setting themselves up for future drafts or for future seasons in terms of the moves that they're making. Not only did they get there to fill their needs, but they were able to do it because they didn't have too many more holes on their roster to set themselves up for the future. And that's what they did with McCormick. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are very smart in that decision. Not only are they setting themselves up, but he's actually a good player. If you watch his film, he's a mauler. So he's very athletic as well, and a true Pittsburgh Steeler because the Pittsburgh Steelers love pulling their guards, and he's probably the best pulling guard in the draft. So the Pittsburgh Steelers selected them. And then you look at the next selection. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who did they get? Well, they got to be able to fill depth. Once again, not too many needs, so you get to fill depth throughout the roster. And they grabbed themselves a defense tackle. And even with their next selection, what did they need? Well, they didn't have too many needs, so they were able to fill depth at the cornerback spot as well. With the defensive tackle that they selected, just in case you don't know, it was Logan Lee. And then the cornerback that they took with their last pick was Ryan Watts. So the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to fill depth and go the best player available that they believed were still on the board. And once again, they could be setting themselves up the future. They don't know how many more years Cameron Heyward's going to play, so might as well get some guys in rotation just in case if injuries happen again, people need breathers, or just down the road in the future for the future of the team as well. So the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to set themselves up there. And the cornerback spot, you already have guys like JPJ, you have Dante Jackson, you have Corey Trice coming back, you have Rush. So might as well get yourself another cornerback, fifth cornerback on the roster. Steelers usually carry kind of 5 or 6, so might as well get yourself in Watts, another cornerback who is a very lengthy guy and a person who fits what the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to do at the position: fast, tall, and lengthy. So the Pittsburgh Steelers selected him, and this just set the Steelers up for the best draft in the 2024 draft. They were able to get everyone who they wanted, fill every position of need, but also fill depth all the way across their team. Best player available basically at every single pick as well. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my eyes, had probably the best draft this season in 2024. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about this draft in the entirety and how you believe each of these selections worked out, or do you like them? Would you pick someone different? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you believe the Steelers had the best draft. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers. I covered every single player we drafted in this year's draft. A player profile introduction is on the channel if you want to go check out each person's bio, what they could bring to the football team, the Steelers, and everything like that. I'll continue covering the Steelers all offseason, whether that be trades that are happening, all the undrafted guys that are coming up, going to be signed in the next couple of days, or even today, more signings are coming. Yesterday, they signed some players. I'll cover everything. And I'll also cover some of the players' kind of highlights, breakdowns, reactions as well in the upcoming days. So, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed all of this draft coverage, but make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, and I'll see you guys all later. Till next time, I'm out. Peace.